Listen, you bozo. We don't do stuff like that. Don't ever say that again. You trying to make money out of me? This ain't no Super Mario Brothers. Idiot.
I was wiping my own ass while I was using these bathrooms, and some of my feces got on my hands. So I figured it would be a crazy idea to lick my own hands. Okay?
I'll have a chat with this Lord Humongous. He seems a reasonable man. Episode 174. I'm sorry, I gotta get this out of the way.
아, 이거는 못 고르지.
Nope, we're gonna do it to him. The following episode is about the most obnoxious and embarrassing band that I listen to, and that's really saying something. Viewer discretion is advised. Episode 174, Bloodstained Child.
Woo! Nature Boy Ric Flair! Macho Man Rick Savaging! It's sick, it's pissed!
Nominally a melodic death metal band from Japan, but that's not really why I like them. That's not really why they're important. There's a whole lot more going on with these guys. I mentioned them briefly on the Seiki Matsuo episode as an example of a ostensibly metal band importing a lot of visual kei elements, but in like a really weird way. See, like, pretty much everybody in this band looks normal except for one of the main songwriters and the lead guitarist, Ryu, who looks like... I mean, it's like, you know, J-rock, J-metal, whatever. There's gonna be some of that.
Hey, I mean, look at this guy, sincerely! Bishop! Staggerfulai Zaha! Huh? Hajat.
But then it's compounded by the fact that the vocalist looks like a dock worker from a Shenmue game.
I'm looking for a guy named Charlie.
And if you only heard their first album, you probably wouldn't think it was that weird of a band. I mean, it's good. You know, I like it, but it's nothing like amazing or strange. It's this sort of like black metal, power metal mixture that was really big in like Finland at the time. They even got some dank Children of Bodom circa Hatebreed fucking orchestra stings, dude. But yeah, no, it's like you get the power metal melodic sensibilities and kind of digga drums with occasional black metal aesthetics. That would be Silence of Northern Hell, the first Bloodstained Child album. And honestly, my favorite thing about the album is that it's fucking called Silence of Northern Hell, because that sounds like fucking black metal as fuck. But it's nothing that crazy for Japan. It's good, but I mean, you got like Guys and Shadow and all these other melodic death metal bands running around there. The Japanese took to like the Scandinavian melodic death metal stuff about as much as New England did around the same time period. Like, you could like trip over a melodic death metal band wandering around Tokyo back in like the early 2000s. But it's on album
Number 2.
entitled Mystic Your Heart, where you can see them start to get quite a bit more unique and start to establish what would kind of become the signature Bloodstained Child sound. You still got the same songwriting core of Ryo and Ryu, the brothers, and then keyboardist Aki, but you can hear he's doing different stuff already. Much less kind of like pseudo-classical music type shit. More almost kind of danceable goth music type things. Maybe even a little bit of electronic trance music in there. And I dig this album quite a bit more than their first one. Because it's like a seamless mixture of these like very fast sequencers with very percussive guitars. Here you can see they kind of up the black metal quotient on this too with the tremolo picking and the shrieks. Most of the power metal has been completely excised from their sound at this point, which I see as a positive. Because I wasn't really into the power metal, melodic death metal of Finland. I'm sorry, I like the Swedish stuff more. But yeah, it's a good album. Lots of good guitar work. Just really nice emotional feel to it without being like too silly. But it's those electronic things that are kind of starting to set them apart. And part of that is they're leaving behind a lot of their Finnish influences and importing a lot more influences from Sweden, specifically In Flames.
Oh no!
Oh yeah.
No, don't worry. It's not like the new bad sort of like pop music In Flames, but it's not the old like thrashy folk influenced melodic stuff of early In Flames either. We're talking about like mid to late 90s In Flames, which in its own way was actually very poppy. In fact, possibly it was like more pop music than the newer In Flames, because I find newer In Flames to be very abrasive on my ears, whereas like mid 90s In Flames is very like pleasant and easy to listen to. But then again, maybe like part of modern pop music is that it has to be abrasive to get your attention in the social media age. But these guys listened to that era of In Flames a lot more closely and paid a lot more attention to the songwriting than most people that took influence from it, i.e., you know, like your standard metalcore bands. And they also like really turned almost into kind of like a dance band in a very interesting and strange way. But how do you combine something like this with, well, you know... Well, if you listen closely on like the last two good In Flames albums before they turned into a shitty nu metal band, they were already sort of attempting that kind of synthesis. You see, they got the same harmonized guitars they always had, but it has more of an electronic backbeat to it. And Bjorn Galat's even kind of drumming almost like a TRS 808 drum machine with those little skittery cymbals and shit. And then it leans back into like more conventional melodic death metal right around now. This is off of Clayman, by the way. It's Bullet Ride. But then here comes more electronic stuff. On the last verse in this song, they incorporate an actual drum machine. And then we have like kind of this spooky narration that Anders is doing. That'll become important for Bloodstained Child. And then he kind of like elides that narration in and out of like a more melodic singing vocal. Might be some kind of cringe for some people, but if you can get used to like his particular cadence, I think it's enjoyable. But yeah, that was like that era of In Flames. Bloodstained Child really paid attention to like the nuances of the songwriting that were going on there. Not just, oh, you know, you could play like these harmonized guitars and shout over it. That's how you get metalcore. That's not what Bloodstained Child are doing on
Number 3.
Idolator, which I would consider the first like real classic Bloodstained Child album. The guitars take on a much more danceable, very percussive cast while simultaneously being incredibly melodic, which is sort of like a trademark for this band. And like the percussion, the drum beat is something in between like a Kraftwerk style Motric beat and then maybe like a punkish B-beat type of thing. But you could see why, you know, you might listen to In Flames and think, well, you know, they sort of hinted at this sound. Why don't we just take that and run with it? And that's how you get Bloodstained Child. And it's really good. Here comes some clean stuff. And I actually think, you know, they're better singers than Anders is, so that works out for the best. It's also not as maudlin and overwrought as like late 90s In Flames was. A bit more positive sounding.
앙골라 이건 포기, 패스.
It's more like HIV positive.
How dare you?
You ain't fooling me, I know you love this.
그리고 진짜 제가 해보고 싶은 게
Very dynamic music, as you can hear in this section. Lots of like speeding up and slowing down. That string skippy thing had a very electronic feel to it. In fact, the way he's playing his guitar almost sounds like a sequenced, like sampled loop, but he's just playing that thing over and over to make it sound electronic, even though it's just all him doing guitar stuff. Very interesting album, Idolator. Also, nice sweep picks there, my man. Then we get to album number
4.
Mosaic. Apparently this is where they started to lose a lot of their initial fans. In fact, there's people out there that only like the first 2 Bloodstained Child albums, like, you know, the boring ones. I guess I like the second one a lot. But yeah, they hate this album because this is like when they fully turned into a very weird sort of electronic pop band utilizing metal influences. But I think it's really unique and interesting. We're going to do some rhythmic analysis here. So we have this like very, you know, sequence kind of electronics loop. And then the guitars are punctuating the end of each synthesized phrase. And then watch this. Percussive phrase into... Look at this. This is like a melodic death thrash riff. But it fits in perfectly with that same rhythmic sequence they were doing with the electronic stuff. And I find that to be very interesting. These guys are more deserving of the Tons Metal dance metal tag than Rammstein is, because they are both more danceable and way more fucking metal. So yeah, no, Mosaic, great fucking album. Dig the shit out of this one. But, you know, given that I started really enjoying Bloodstained Child with the album after this, I see this kind of like a prelude to where they would go with Epsilon, the most controversial Bloodstained Child album. If you were to ask their older fans, this is like, you know, their Reroute to Remain, if we're going to use In Flames as a comparison. This is like the sellout album. I, of course, disagree because I'm obnoxious. This is by far the most pop music kind of album they ever did, but in an interesting way because there's like a shit ton of variety. It almost reminds me of Keyboard's Dancing in Hell album, where he did like dance versions of all his different songs, but each song was like a different style of dance music. There'd be like a GABA one and a hard bass one, like sort of like an acid techno one, a big beat one. That's kind of what these guys did because this album has a whole shit ton of songs and they all sound very different from each other. It's like flipping channels through like the world's greatest like pop music station, but it's also metal. Almost comparable to Psy's Imaginary Sonicscape album in a way, which came out around the same time. And they have a new vocalist. I mean, the same, you know, like Rio's still around, so the harsh vocals are still there, but they got somebody named Sophia doing clean vocals, and I think she has a really cool voice. And it's not a very like J-pop kind of voice either. It's, what would you compare it to? Maybe like one of those like Beauty and the Beast style goth metal bands that were big in like the mid-90s. So that's the general gist of what's going on album
Number 5,
which features my personal favorite Bloodstained Child song, Stargazer.
Listen, you bozo.
Not that one.
분기반장을 잘할 수 있어.
The guitars, of course, are even more percussive, given that it is strayed even further into the realms of dance music. The keyboards are a lot louder and are basically doing like trance electronica stuff. And there's a lot of transitions. You know, a lot of them start out with the guy going, wow, and then it just switches tempo. These are her vocals. They are the best. And I will not hear any arguments on that. She has a lot of cool, like, asides right here. See, like that, she'll stop the song and, like, kind of do a little interjection and then come back to the main melody. Very interesting stuff. Another big one coming up here when she transitions to the chorus. This one. This is cool. Watch this. A little kind of warbling up and down. And then, like, this is the big chorus, obviously, if you couldn't tell. And it's pretty awesome. Apparently she speaks, like, 10 different languages, too. She's not Japanese. I think she's from Greece or something, from if I read right. But yeah, this is a metal album, and we are going to get into one of the more metal segments of the song, which features kind of an interesting sort of descending, almost depressive punk thing, leading into some great trade-off guitar solos. You gotta like that. With that like danceable drum beat in the background. Very unique sound. And then the vocals are gonna come back and they're like this layered choral thing. That's very cool. Big fan of that. So a lot of this song is about building up to maximum points of density, like this one right here. Very dense, and then we back off immediately into negative space and then slowly adding in more layers, which I think is a very interesting way to do stuff. You know, it's like obviously pop music, but it's good pop music, you know, like Depeche Mode or Aha or something, not dumb, you know, friggin' Cardi B or whatever. So that song was obviously like very danceable and very poppy, and it's probably my favorite song on the album, the one I've listened to the most. But if you were to ask me what like the best song technically was on the album, I would go with Unlimited Alchemist, which is notable for being probably the most metal song on the album. Very thrashy at points, definitely groove heavy too, and then it does a lot of switching back and forth into this weird kind of like trancey dance thing. And what's cool here is the vocal trade-offs, like so. A lot of like Rio and Sophia go back and forth between shrieking and singing in a very well done way. Like it's still danceable, obviously, and it's still metal. Interesting stuff. Really love the piano right here. That's good stuff. I feel like I say that a lot about this album. I don't know. I listen to it a whole lot. Big Jim album for me. I know that's a cliche. Here's some cool piano stuff. And it's gonna go into like a very sort of like hardcore style breakdown right here. Told you. But then they climb out of it with like some guitar soloing, which is an interesting choice right here. Look, that's pretty cool. Didn't expect that. And then it's gonna go into one of those more kind of like dreamy vocal sequences right here. A whole lot of stuff going on. Got those like synthesized strings. They hadn't really used those since their first album. It's way different now. But yeah, we have these like echoed vocals kind of in the distance. Then she starts doubling up on them. They removed that kind of like echoey phone vocal reverb thing. I don't know what to call that. But yeah, awesome double scream right there. Unlimited Alchemist. Maybe that actually is my favorite song. I don't know. That or Stargazer. They got a lot of good songs. I'm stupid. But if you ask me, it's everybody else that was fucking stupid because this album got shat on so hard by people, even though it's clearly awesome. I mean, you heard those 2 songs, those were great. And I don't know if it was because of that, but for whatever reason, Sophia left, and they decided to keep running with like the female singer thing. They hired someone named Kiki who was Japanese and had like a noticeable accent, so it was kind of like a different sound. Her vocals weren't as soaring as Sophia's were, but she kind of had her own style, and she also did like harsh vocals to like switch off. Pretty interesting stuff. They redid Stargazer, called it Stargazer X. That's a video on YouTube worth watching if you want to see one of their more like famous kind of interesting videos. But after that, didn't really work either. They kind of disappeared for a while, which is very sad. I know it sucks. I really would have liked to see like the Stargazer X version of the band put out a full length, but it didn't happen. However, there are some bands kind of poking around Japan that are probably pretty influenced by Bloodstained Child that are worth mentioning. First one is Crossfaith, who are probably a bit more famous over here than Bloodstained Child is. Unlike Bloodstained Child, who are sort of like a melodic death metal band that turned into a dance band, these guys have like a much more obvious kind of metalcore thing going on, but those synths scream Bloodstained Child to me. And at least their first album, I find to be really cool. It's maybe not as like sophisticated as Bloodstained Child is, but it's another album that's pretty good at the gym. However, also unlike Bloodstained Child, these guys are not super Japanese sounding. In fact, based on like stuff I've read from them, they really can't stand like the Japanese music scene, and that attitude leads to some unfortunate things happening, such as
introducing to you the ultimate collaboration.
Oh no.
Crossfaith and Skinhead. Wildfire. Together we deliver wildfire. Wake up.
Oh. Yeah, I never want to relive that particular era of music. And the unfortunate thing about Crossfaith is, while they do have some good stuff, you have to watch out for occasional hidden mines like that. Yikes. A much more stable and overall better band, in my estimation, that has a much clearer influence from Bloodstained Child would be Merging Moon, who are perhaps much more into straight-ahead death metal than Bloodstained Child is, but they also got plenty of catchy little melodic bits like that mixed in with some like grinding electronics. Very cool band. They have a really cool vocalist named Yu, who is a woman who is doing these vocals, but also does the clean vocals. Well, as you can hear, like the actual death metal shit on this is very intense. Almost kind of avant-garde, later Emperor type shit with the transitions. And there's the clean vocals. Really cool stage presence too. She wears like these big robes and is like running all over the place doing these wacky gesticulations. Big fan of Merging Moon. I found them out while I was researching for this episode, and I like them a lot, at least on the one album of theirs that I got. And they're still around today putting out new stuff. But you know who else is still putting out new stuff? See, she knows. It's Bloodstained Child. They're back. I thought they had gone completely like Seikimatsu or X Japan, where they would occasionally do like one new song or just greatest hits, re-recordings type things. No. 2019, they put out a new album and another big style change. It's much more guitar heavy than their like latter-day albums are wont to be. And guess what else is back? There's like a lot of power metal on this too, especially with the new vocalist. They haven't done too much power metal stuff since their first album, maybe. I don't know, so I'm interested to see what happens with this new era of Bloodstained Child. Hopefully you were able to stomach that obnoxiously jubcore episode of shit that literally only I like. And I'll see you next week, hopefully for something a bit more normal.
What the fuck is that? It might be you.